A man tied to a chair. His lips split, laughter echoing in the warehouse. "Call that biker of yours now," someone jeered, shoving a phone toward him. He spat blood and whispered one name. Seconds later, the rumble of 20 engines shook the night, and steel doors trembled. Before we start today's story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Also, please subscribe to the channel. It will help us to bring you more inspiring stories every day. Jayden Ward never thought his life would come to this moment. Born in a small Oregon town, he grew up quiet, more comfortable fixing carburetors than raising his voice. People called him the mechanic kid, the one who always had grease under his nails. His father left when he was 12, leaving his mother and younger sister to survive on diner wages and Jayden's odd jobs. By 17, he was the one neighbors called when their lawnmower coughed out or their truck stalled in the rain. He didn't wear leather or patches, just denim jackets, a baseball cap, and a pair of scarred hands that had seen too much work too soon. Life taught him patience, but it also taught him silence, and bullies liked silence. The local crew that swaggered around Main Street knew it. They mocked him for his quiet eyes, his worn boots, his unshakable calm. Jayden swallowed their words, until one night their game went too far. The crew wasn't a gang, not in the official sense, just a circle of spoiled men in their 20s who thought Main Street belonged to them. Their leader, Jace, was the kind of man who never worked a day but always had a wad of cash. His father owned half the strip malls in town. He liked to strut into the garage where Jayden worked, tossing keys on the counter, grinning with gold-ringed fingers. "Fix it cheap, grease boy, or maybe I'll find someone who can." Jayden never rose to the bait. He just worked, wiping. His hands on a rag, nodding, saying, "You'll have it by Friday." That calm made Jace furious. Bullies wanted fear. They wanted fire. Jayden gave him nothing. And in that nothing, Jace saw a mirror of his own weakness. So he pressed harder. One night, it wasn't about cars anymore. It was about breaking Jayden in front of everyone. The town bar on Friday night smelled of smoke, cheap whiskey and spilled beer. Jayden rarely went, but that night he walked in, just to pick up his sister, who had started waitressing there. She was tired, balancing trays, trying to pay her way through community college. Jayden had promised their mother he'd look out for her. That's when Jace and his crew spotted him. "Look who finally crawled out of the grease pit," Jace sneered, raising his glass. The others laughed. Jayden ignored them, walked to the counter, and quietly asked his sister if she was ready to go. But the laughter didn't stop. Boots scraped. Jace circled. "You think you're better than us, always walking like you're above it." His words carried across the bar, drawing eyes. Jayden stood still, jaw tight. He didn't answer. He reached for his sister's coat. That's when the first shove came, hard, sudden, spilling his sister's tray. The night turned. It didn't take long for Jace's crew to drag Jayden out the back door. His sister screamed, rushing after them, but someone held her back. Jayden hit the pavement, his head ringing. Hands pinned his arms. Voices hissed in his ear. "Let's teach the mechanic boy how the world works." They bound his wrists with a torn belt, laughed as they propped him against a chair inside the dim, half-abandoned storage shed behind the bar. The smell of oil and rust clung to the walls. Jayden's chest rose and fell steadily. He didn't beg. He didn't curse. That made them angrier. Jace leaned in close, eyes glittering. "You got friends, Jayden? Anyone who'd come for you?" He smirked, pulling out a phone. "No? Then maybe we'll call one for you. How about that biker you've been seen talking to at the garage?" The others howled with laughter. Jayden's silence was about to shatter. There was truth to Jace's words. Jayden had a friend, one that no one in town expected. A man who had rolled into the garage months earlier, on a thunder-black Harley, asking for nothing more than a new clutch cable. His name was Mason Bear Callahan, a Hell's Angel with arms like tree trunks and eyes sharp as winter steel. Most people in town kept their distance, whispering when his crew roared down the highway, but Jayden didn't flinch. He fixed the bike, charged a fair price, and offered Mason a cup of coffee from the corner pot. That was the beginning. Now, bound to a chair with blood on his lip, Jayden let a slow breath out. He looked Jace in the eye, voice low, steady. "You want me to call him? Fine." He whispered Mason's name. Silence fell for a moment, then a wave of mocking laughter. But outside, beyond the cracked shed windows, the night had begun to rumble. The sound began faint, like distant thunder. At first, no one inside the shed paid attention. Jace leaned back, smirking, tossing the phone toward Jayden's lap as if daring him. "Go ahead, grease boy. Call your biker daddy." The crew roared with laughter. Jayden said nothing. He didn't need to. The hum grew steadier, closer. An unmistakable growl of engines devouring the road. Jayden's sister, still outside the bar, heard it first. Her eyes widened as headlights cut through the night fog. One, then two, then a line of them. Like a river of fire. Mason rode at the front, beard catching the streetlight glow, leather vest marked with the patch no one in town dared test. The ground itself seemed to shake. Inside the shed, the crew's laughter faltered, just a flicker of unease. Jayden lifted, his head, blood on his lip, and for the first time that night a quiet smile formed at the corner of his mouth. The warehouse doors rattled before they burst open. 20 bikers flooded in like a storm, boots pounding, chains clinking, eyes burning. Mason's silhouette filled the doorway, broad and unyielding. The crew froze, their swagger crumbling. The laughter that once echoed now died in their throats. Jayden's sister rushed in behind them, her cry breaking the silence. "They tied him up!" Her voice shook. Mason's gaze locked onto Jayden, bound, bruised but unbroken. Without a word, Mason crossed the room. He didn't raise a hand. He didn't need to. 2 bikers cut Jayden free while the others formed. A wall around him, leather and steel shielding his trembling figure. Jace tried to laugh again, his voice cracking. "We were just kidding around." His smirk faltered under Mason's stare. The room was heavy with unspoken threat. The air crackled. This was no game anymore. Mason crouched in front of Jayden, steady hands untying the last knot at his wrists. His voice was low, calm, almost fatherly. "You all right, brother?" Jayden nodded, flexing his fingers, blood rushing back into them. The silence that followed was louder than any shout. Jayden's sister clung to his shoulder, her eyes wet. Across the room, Jace tried to reclaim his bravado. "This doesn't concern you, old man. Just a little lesson for the mechanic." Mason stood to his full height, his shadow swallowing Jace whole. "You think tying a man to a chair makes you strong?" His voice rumbled, steady, like the engines outside. "Strength isn't in chains. It's in standing beside someone when the world tries to break them." The crew shifted uncomfortably. No one laughed now. Jayden wiped his lip, the quiet strength in his eyes matching Mason's. For once he wasn't alone. The bikers didn't raise fists. They didn't need to. Their presence was enough to strip the swagger from Jace and his followers. One of Mason's men stepped forward, pulling the chair aside with a screech, clearing the floor as if daring Jace to make his move. But he didn't. His face flushed red, his jaw tightening. Jayden stood taller, his shoulders back though his body ached. "You said I had no friends," he said softly, his voice carrying farther than he expected. He gestured toward the leather wall behind him. "Looks like you were wrong." Murmurs rippled through the crowd that had gathered outside the shed, drawn by the thunder of engines. Ordinary townsfolk, neighbors, bar regulars, even kids, watched wide-eyed. The bullies, once feared, now looked small beneath the weight of 20 bikers and the silent judgment of their own community. Jace tried to step forward, to claw back the moment. "You think this changes anything? You're still nothing, Ward. You'll always be nothing." The words hung heavy, bitter, but Mason only shook his head, a slow, knowing gesture. He placed a hand on Jayden's shoulder, firm and unyielding. "No man is nothing," Mason said. His voice carried like scripture, echoing against the rusted walls. "You tried to break him because you saw what you'll never have. Honor. And honor doesn't bow to chains, or fists, or cowards." The bikers rumbled their approval, low growls of agreement. Outside, the crowd leaned in, their silence a verdict. For the first time in years, Jayden looked his tormentor in the eye without lowering his gaze. His lips still bled, but his spirit didn't. That night, in a shed filled with smoke and steel, something shifted. The air was thick, charged like a storm before lightning. Jace's eyes darted between Jayden, Mason, and the wall of leather-clad men behind him. He puffed out his chest, desperate to salvage his image. "So what? You brought your biker army. Big deal. This is still my town." His voice wavered. Mason didn't move, didn't need to. Instead, he stepped aside and let Jayden walk forward. Every eye followed him. Jayden's boots scraped against the concrete, slow, deliberate. His wrists still ached from the belt, but his back was straight. For years he had been silent, swallowing mockery, shrinking in shadows. Now the weight of silence broke. He stopped, just inches from Jace. The crowd hushed. "No," Jayden said, voice calm, steady as the engines outside. "This town doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the people who live in it. People who work, people who stand by each other." His words landed like hammer blows. Jace's smirk cracked. Jayden's sister, still gripping his arm, whispered, "Please don't." Her eyes begged him not to provoke further violence, but Jayden wasn't provoking, he was standing. Mason watched with a faint smile, as if this moment had been waiting to rise from Jayden all along. Jace tried one last jab, spitting the words like poison. "You think anyone cares what you say? You're a nobody mechanic. You'll fix cars your whole life and die in grease." The insult should have stung, but it didn't. Jayden raised his chin. "Maybe, but at least I'll know I built something. At least I'll know I didn't tear people down to feel tall." Silence followed, a silence louder than fists. For the first time, Jace found no laughter backing him, no voices echoing his mockery. His crew shifted, eyes down, the crowd watching with quiet shame. The man who once strutted now stood alone. But Jace wasn't finished. Bullies rarely surrender without one last swing. His hand darted toward his jacket pocket. The crowd gasped. A flash of steel glinted beneath the dim bulb, a switchblade snapping open. Before anyone could react, Mason's hand clamped over Jace's wrist like an iron trap. The knife clattered to the floor. Mason leaned close, his voice low but deadly. "Cowards hide behind blades, men face truth." He released Jace with a shove that sent him stumbling backward, crashing into the wall. Two bikers stepped forward, kicking the knife out of reach. The crowd erupted into whispers, shock rippling like fire. Jayden didn't flinch. His calm eyes stayed locked on Jace, no fear left in them. Jace had swung his last card and it fell flat. He wasn't in control anymore. The bikers didn't strike. They didn't need to. The humiliation was enough. Mason turned, looking at the gathered townsfolk at the doorway, then back at Jayden. "What do you want us to do with him?" Mason asked, voice even. Jayden blinked, surprised. For the first time, the choice was his. He could demand vengeance, humiliate Jace, crush him in front of everyone. But as the knife lay harmless on the ground, Jayden saw something else. Jace's eyes weren't just angry. They were scared, small and hollow. Jayden's fists unclenched. He shook his head. "Nothing," he said quietly. "Let him walk out. Let everyone here see what he really is." A murmur rolled through the crowd, approval swelling. Jayden's sister squeezed his arm. relief washing over her face. In that moment, Jayden reclaimed what Jace had tried to take: dignity. Jace's crew hesitated, unsure whether to stay loyal or slink away. Mason's gaze pinned them until their eyes dropped and their boots shuffled toward the door. One by one, they left, leaving Jace standing. Alone, red-faced and cornered, Mason's men parted, giving him a path out. No fists, no revenge, just exposure. Jace spat on the ground, but the venom was gone from him. He pushed past the crowd and disappeared into the night, his footsteps small against the thunder of 20 motorcycles. Jayden stood in the middle of the shed, his chest rising and falling, his lip still bleeding, but his spirit taller than it had ever been. The bikers surrounded him not as saviors, but as witnesses to a man who had found his voice. Mason clapped his shoulder, pride in his eyes. "That's strength, brother," he said. "Not fists, not fear. Standing tall when they try to make you crawl." The shed emptied slowly, the air cooling as the tension dissolved. Outside, the engines still rumbled, steady as a heartbeat. Jayden stepped into the night, his sister at his side, Mason and the others following. The crowd that had gathered didn't jeer or whisper anymore. They simply watched, quiet, thoughtful. Some nodded with respect. Others looked ashamed for not standing up sooner. Jayden wiped the blood from his mouth with the back of his hand, then straightened his jacket. His boots crunched gravel as he walked, no longer hurried, no longer small. Mason walked beside him, silent but steady. The message was clear. Jayden wasn't alone anymore, and maybe he never really had been. The town had just needed to see it. They rode together that night. Mason insisted Jayden climb on the back of his Harley, despite Jayden's protests. "You earned this," Mason said with a grin. The engines roared to life in unison, a symphony of thunder spilling through the town streets. Neighbors peeked from windows. Bar patrons stumbled outside, children pressed their faces to glass. They saw Jayden, quiet Jayden, the mechanic kid, riding among legends. For the first time in years, Jayden felt weight lift from his shoulders. He wasn't defined by silence anymore. He was defined by the way he stood when the world tried to break him. The convoy stretched down the highway, headlights cutting through the darkness like a river of fire. Jayden gripped the seat, the wind rushing against his face. Behind him, the night no longer felt cold. When Mason finally pulled up at Jayden's small garage, the bikers idled in a semicircle, their engines humming low, respectful. Mason leaned close. "You stood taller than most men I've known. Don't forget it." Jayden nodded, words caught in his throat. He didn't need to speak. His eyes said it all. Gratitude, relief, strength. His sister hugged him fiercely, whispering, "I thought I lost you." Jayden held her, longer than words could cover. The bikers revved once, a chorus of approval. Then one by one peeled off into the night. Mason lingered last, giving a final nod before disappearing into the dark road. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful, full, earned. Jayden stood in front of his garage, shoulders squared, the smell of gasoline and steel grounding him. He had always been the mechanic kid, but now he was something more. Word spread through the town quickly. By morning, everyone knew what had happened in the shed. The story carried not as gossip, but as a quiet shift in respect. Jace no longer swaggered through Main Street unchecked. His crew scattered, their laughter hollow. And Jayden? He returned to his garage, fixing cars, mowers, trucks, just as before. But people looked at him differently. They didn't see the quiet boy to mock. They saw the man who stood his ground, who had friends in places no one dared tread, who carried honor like armor. Sometimes townsfolk would glance at the highway, wondering if the roar of engines might return, But Jayden didn't wait for their protection anymore. He had found his own, and that was enough. One evening, as the sun sank over the Oregon hills, Jayden sat outside the garage wiping grease from his hands. His sister brought him coffee, setting it beside him with a smile. The road stretched ahead, endless and quiet. A faint rumble carried on the wind, distant engines fading into the horizon. Jayden smiled not because he expected them, but because he knew they had been there when it mattered. He had been bound, mocked, nearly broken. But in the moment of his trial he discovered something Jace could never steal: dignity. Strength wasn't in fists or chains. It was in standing tall, even when your knees tremble. Jayden raised his cup to the open sky, whispering a thank you that needed no answer. The night settled gently, and the world felt wide again. Sometimes life ties you down, mocks you, pushes you to break. But strength is found not in revenge, but in standing with honor. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the bell icon, so more stories of hope and courage can find their way to you.